Jay, I didn't want to interrupt, and thank you for that. Very enlightening. Sorry to bother you, but I just received news in the past hour, so as many of us discussed the issue of national unity a moment ago. The so-called independent Liberal senators, they're not Liberals, they're independent senators, voted to uphold the Bill C-48, the moratorium on the tanker ban, effectively shutting down any opportunity for Indigenous groups or others to resuscitate anything equivalent to the Northern Gateway pipeline. Clearly, the 6 provinces that have, including yours, Todd, that lamented this with the federal government and were called separatists or not necessarily in the interests of national unity. In my view, we did the right thing. Unfortunately, the Senate did not, led by Peter Harder, who reported to me when I was minister responsible for Canadians abroad. I'm not at all surprised by this, but I did mention the issue of national unity. I think that's now become a very important issue, and Mr. Scheer, I'm here to help.
What's the gain?
So Bill C-48.
What's their gain?
I can't hear.
What's the gain for that bill to be passed? What is the gain? What's the end game?
Yeah, the end game is to stop any type of oil tankers from coming in on the North Shore
in BC.
in British Columbia.
We got too
But
much
not
oil coming from Arabia going into the Quebec refineries and the maritime refineries, and we've got Caisse Populaire and SNC Lavalin and that whole crew with $10, $20 billion worth of investments in Arabia. That's why there's no Eastern pipeline.
So I talked to Dean a little earlier about when the House had risen. It did today, and the first question I asked is what happened to Bill C-48, C-69, because the Senate had made a number of amendments both to the anti-pipeline bill, which was C-69, as well as the tanker moratorium, C-48. The Senate has just passed it. In other words, the House of Commons, led by the Liberals, decided not to take any of the amendments very seriously. They've brought it right back to the Senate. The Senate has done what it has to do, rubber stamp. Certainly it's made the proposals, it's done its sober second thought. At the end of the day, you now have Constitutional Crisis 101 on your hands. So get ready, this is just about an election. It's about the future of the country.
Coalition!
Here's Jocelyn.
Thanks, Jay, for your speech. Sorry we didn't stop to thank you. That was, yes. It is a downer. That is exciting when we talk about the technology and innovation, and that's one of the things that I really love about being involved with the coalition, because you find out people's stories, like the stories of innovation, the stories like Shalini's family, her grandfather escaped Idi Amin's regime to come here and start a great business and employ a lot of people. When we talk about, there's a great a company in our coalition called Powerline Plus. You probably see them all over Toronto. That gentleman came here from Iran with $20 in his pocket, lived in a basement apartment for the longest time, learned to trade, grew a company, and now that company employs over 600 people. So there's so many stories that will absolutely warm your heart, stories of innovation, entrepreneurship, starting companies, and if you talk to anybody in the room, they are amazing stories and we need to embrace them. I understand Rod's about 2 minutes away, so I'm just going to say my closing remarks before we wait for him to come. But I want to thank all of you for coming today. I know it's a rainy day. Somebody sent a note saying, do we really have to come? And we were saying, yeah, you have to come. You have to show up. It's so important for us to raise our voices. And when we started the coalition because some of the associations that we belong to and some of the chambers that we belong to were not representing us. They weren't talking about the things that were important to us, and they were not rallying for us. And I couldn't figure out what the reason for that was. And the more I got involved, the more I realized that a lot of them get money from the government, and when you get money from the government, you're beholden to the government and you won't speak the truth. And so, we started this coalition out of complete necessity, and I thank each and every one of you because it's very important for our stories to get out, and not just for us. My husband Brad, a long time ago, taught me the most important thing I've ever learned. And I came to a family business. I wasn't born into it. I married into it. I was from corporate Canada. I worked in a big corporation downtown, and all I was worried about was getting my team to plan. And when I started to work for Brad after my first child was born, we were making a decision, and he looked at me and he said, what do you not get? We don't make decisions just for you and me. We make decisions for you and me and our employees and all of their families. And then the second most important thing that I learned was when I found out how great some of the opportunities in the United States were, some of the incentives that they had, I looked at Brad and I said, maybe we should think about moving. And he looked at me and said, do you want to just get up and leave, or do you want to stay and fight? And I said, no, we are going to stay and fight. And we're going to stay and fight, not just for us and our kids and our families, but for all of our employees and for all of their families. And I will tell you, last week, I have never seen Brad so angry. We had a representative from the federal government come to talk to us, not from you. And he said, he was a bureaucrat, and he said to Brad and I, you should really, I'm talking as a friend to you, but you should really think about there's a time when you will have to move your business. And at that time, I thought, Brad looked at him and I was like, okay, this is not going to go well. And Brad said, you work for the federal government. You're telling me that you think that I should consider moving my business. And he said, what am I going to do? What am I going to tell my employees that have given their heart and soul to us and their families? I'm not doing it. Maybe what we should do is change the federal government instead. So that's what we are going to do. We're going to fight and change. And so with no further ado, I see our special guest has arrived. This gentleman, just like Todd, was with us from the beginning. I met Rod when he came bravely enough to a round table about 2 years ago. And Rod thought he was coming into some businesses that were going to be super friendly. And did we ever give him an earful? And Rod, I remember saying, okay, I can't fix it unless I get elected. Yeah. So Rod has been with us from the beginning. He was with us at our first round table. He was with us last year at our first AGM. And I am very excited, and please stand and give a round of applause for our newest finance minister, Rod Phillips.
Thank you. It's and Vess, our host. Thank you for having us here, Todd and myself. It is. Well, you guys keep the locations. I gotta say, keep moving around. It's so it's always exciting because I get to see a new site every time. It's so great. I'm gonna say a bunch of nice things about Todd here.
Don't bother. They already know.
I know. Yeah. No, well, that's right. He already spoke about himself. When we talk about really getting down to action on trying to fix the sort of things that need to be fixed, and the sort of things that you all were very clear with me about, I guess about a year and 6 or 8 months ago at Serati, when the meeting that Jocelyn talked about. Just so you know the focus that our Premier has and that the government has. Todd has had an item until he got a great new job today, but Todd had an item on the agenda of every cabinet meeting we have. And Todd and I both sit on something called Priorities and Planning, which is kind of like the executive committee where we talk about these things, but at the cabinet level, every time we have a cabinet meeting, there's a report about reducing regulation, reducing red tape, what are we doing to help business? And I think that went to a new level now today with the announcement of our colleague Vic Fideli, and the announcement, and I'm sure Todd mentioned, of a minister, a great guy, you're gonna love him when you meet him, whose whole role is gonna be focusing on what are we doing in a systematic way to hit the objective that Todd set, the Premier said, about getting rid of 25% of this. So you all know in your business, and those of you I got to know before know that my background was running businesses, that if you don't set that kind of metric, if you don't set that kind of objective, that nothing really ever gets done in a big way. So I think, Todd was leading that charge. He's now got a whole other charge to lead. Better you than me, buddy. In terms of a very important part of our government that really does, in all seriousness, does take care of the most needy. And let's face it, this is why we all believe in government, why we pay our taxes, why we think it's good to do these things, because there's people who need help. And those people most often are the people that are in Todd's ministry, so I know he'll do a fantastic job there. But I'm sure you've been regaled with all the good work that we're doing, and so I'll leave that for another day. Jocelyn, I want to pick up where I came in terms of the real importance of what's going to happen here in this province and in this country politically in October. Again, in our roles, until recently, Minister of the Environment, working with the federal minister there. I know Todd in his role working with his federal counterparts. This is just a government that does not appreciate the importance of the people who make a payroll every 2 weeks, put their money at risk, that actually make the investments that make our country work. Anytime I finish speaking, we're talking a lot about getting rid of regulation. A lot of that's the environment area. We have done some good things. We got rid of the Toxic Reductions Act. We're doing some great things around environmental assessments. You'll see more from our colleague Jeff Urich in terms of trying to just have sensible rules. We made changes to the Endangered Species Act, not because we don't care about species, but because we need to be able to balance that in a sensible way. So not easy things for a government to do, but as much as those aren't easy things for governments to do, we know that it's people like yourselves who actually, all we do is create an environment. You then put money at risk. You put your time at risk. You put, all of those things, your employees at risk when you take risks and chances to build a business. And in building those businesses, you build our country. So we very clearly understand that and appreciate that. Our federal friends, the federal Liberals, do not. Right? They do not. And so, Jocelyn, I just heard the back half of that story, but I could almost tell you the beginning and the end because we hear it all the time. So, this election is going to be a very important election, as you did so effectively for myself, for Todd, our colleagues, as you reached out to your employees, to your communities, and you helped them appreciate what it is that you mean to your community, that you mean to their families, and therefore what their vote and their activity means in the coming election. I can only encourage you and ask you to do the same. It is going to be, I suspect, a very close election. It's a very complicated bit of politics. Some days we don't make it any easier for our federal friends, as we have to do the tough things that you need to do when you inherit a government that's spending $40 million a day more than it's taking in. In the case of my former ministry, I'm going to have to come up with some new stories, but I'm still stuck with my environment stories. But our creditors, when you think about what we pay our creditors, the whole ministry, everything that we spend on environment, conservation, and parks is less than 12 days of interest payments to our creditors. So, that's a pretty important thing. Environment, conservation, and parks, we'd all like to have more parks. We'd all like to do more for the environment. But in 12 days, we pay our creditors more than the whole investment of the biggest province in our country. I've used the number before with you, but I'll use it again because it's the one that sticks in my head that Todd Smith shared with me. But you think about GDP per capita. It's a pretty simple way to measure your success as a province, and we talk proudly about Ontario like it's a top 10 jurisdiction out of the 65 jurisdictions in North America. Like New York is number 3, or California is number 9. Ontario today is number 46 in GDP per capita. And so, you wonder why we've been running up the credit card. So listen, on behalf of the Premier and Todd and all of us, your continued help and support of what we do. Very specific, tangible things. I can tell you one thing that Jocelyn, I get to answer as Todd does, as my colleagues do, questions in the legislature when it's sitting, and we get these questions from the NDP about this and that, and what are you doing on the environment? And of course, we have a very good plan on the environment. We're doing more than any other province in terms of the reductions we've made. But I phoned Jocelyn and said, do you have some of your companies that can tell us what the impact of the carbon tax is? This on their business for the next year, for the next 4 years. And so we had this great game because Todd was the House leader, so he's kind of the coach on the ground. So when an NDP member would ask a question about something, we'd whip through the notes and find out, oh look, automotive. I can't remember. I'm sorry, I forget.
Back coding.
Yeah, back coding. But there was $4 million of impact, and they're riding in that NDP member's riding. This is the impact of the. What are you doing about that employer? has 200 people, or $200,000 or $400,000. So the collaboration and the cooperation is real and appreciated. It's appreciated to get this kind of support that we get as we try to make the changes that we do. You are going to, again, in Vic Fideli, you couldn't have a better salesman, a better man who will, go to other states and other provinces to get business, but also keep our eye on the wheel and on what needs to be done in terms of making the changes here. And again, just as always, thank you so much for the investments you make in our communities. As I said, we create the environment, you take the risk, you get the benefits when it works, which you should. You also get the downside when it doesn't. And on behalf of all of us in the government, thank you for that, and thank you for your continued advocacy. We appreciate it.
Thanks everyone again for coming. I just want to close a few remarks that say when we don't speak up, there's a void. And voids don't exist in nature, they get filled. And the void created by businesses not speaking up become filled by voices determined to destroy the creative and innovative, job creation, freedom-loving, community-protecting society we want and love for our community. Too many trade associations are cowardly and they don't speak up. Maybe because they get public money, maybe because they have friends in offices or minister staff, maybe because not going with the flow makes them uncomfortable. But for whatever reason they do this, this is wrong. And we need to stand up and have our voices heard. And when we do, we have a powerful voice, because ultimately, again, we're not just doing it for us, we're doing it for our employees and families. So thank you for being here and standing up for businesses and for your employees. We've heard when we first started other associations that said you have to be careful, you're not going to get access. And we said it doesn't matter if you have access if you're not impacting change. So what's important is that we make people understand how important it is to have small and medium-sized businesses be strong and have our employees have jobs and have our kids have jobs. And for too long, we've stayed quiet, kept our heads down, worked, and took whatever they threw at us. But no more. We need to make sure that our businesses are strong so we can employ more people and that they can have good jobs and we raise the middle class up. So thank you for being here and having your voice. If I can ask one thing of you, tell 10 friends to lend their voice and keep Connor. Where are you, Connor? Keep Connor employed. Thanks very much. There's more food, there's drinks, stay and chat. And the next time we'll be together again, we'll be in January, middle of January, for our Game Changer of the Year award. Please make sure you're there.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Oh, I had no idea.